With 2 books being published every year under his name, the CEO and MD of KBC, Mr. Waihenya Waithaka, has made it through the ranks of journalism as a profession. He started off as a columnist with the Standard newspaper, but his passion did not end there. He has inspired and touched many upcoming journalists, and above all, he is a role model to many. Help me in welcoming Mr. Waihenya Waithaka. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
Maybe just a bit of a brief. How did you start? When did you decide to get into journalism?
I started from the lowest rank that anyone can start. I was a district correspondent in Kiambu. Right after college, I graduated from Kenyatta University, and I started from the courts. I was a court reporter for the Standard newspaper in Kiambu, and then I joined a magazine and then rejoined the Standard as a features writer, and I became the features and supplements editor much later, then the assistant editor of that paper, and eventually I ended up being the editorial writer and columnist for the Standard. And by the time I left, I was the associate editor of that newspaper.
Is this something you always wanted to be?
Yes, I think journalism has been in my blood throughout my life, because in every school I went to, I started school papers. And not even that, one of the most interesting things that I did, and I hope my father is not listening to this, but my father was a teacher, and so was my mother. They were tough disciplinarians. So after some time, they would call us for a kamkuji and read the riot act to us. That time I used to take notes discreetly. And after that, I would report what had transpired and then give my brothers and sisters secretly that newspaper. I used to call it a newspaper. I won't tell you the name, but my father never got to know about it until much, much later. And he wanted to kill me for that, because he didn't know that that is what we were doing. But later, when I went to school, I started newspapers in everywhere I went. And even in Kenyatta University, we started a newspaper called The Campus Beacon with one Otieno Amisi and and David Aduda, who is, I think, editorial manager at The Nation today. So it's something that has been in my blood.
When a lot of people look at journalism as a profession, they believe this is a profession anyone can work, in it. All you need, maybe it's a face and a voice. What's your take on that?
Journalism has all the glamour in it, but beneath that, there are a lot of unsavory things. You really need to work hard to get a name in journalism. Even the news anchors you see, it's not just about pretty faces. It's about real hard work. What many people don't know is that the challenges that journalism, the journalists today face are immense. Some of them are heartrending. Take, for instance, the fire in Sinai. Before you saw the pictures, these journalists had seen those pictures. Most of them go through a lot of trauma to bring these stories to the people. When you look at an accident, for instance, and when you read about an accident, or you hear about it on the radio or see it on television, does it occur to you that the first person who got there probably was a journalist, and he saw the mess, the mangled bodies and all that? You really need to have a lot of nerves to go through this. Once a story is published or aired, that is the end of it. You start immediately thinking about the next story. So a journalist's life is always on the go. You're always on edge.
Most journalists often are accused of dramatizing stories because for them it's all about having that competitive edge or selling, newspapers. What do you think about it?
I think most journalists try to be faithful to the facts. But a story, a well-told story, must have a number of features in it. For instance, a good journalist should be able to actually dramatize a story without changing the facts. without falsifying anything. But you have to bring that story vividly to your reader or to your viewer.
At times when, like, as viewers, you turn on your TV or listen to radio, you tend to find stories are the same, industrial espionage. Is it because, you want to be on the same page with other media houses, or what's the logic behind it?
I think, one, the industry is very competitive. And two, journalists today are very good. You can't say this media house has poor journalists. This one has the best journalists. So a story that appeals to one journalist is appealing to the other. A story that appeals to one editor today will appeal to another editor in another media house. That is sometimes why you find that all the stories are the same. No one wants to be scooped. Everyone is good at their work.
A lot of journalists, while in the line of duty covering all kinds of stories, some stories may be a bit traumatic. What measures do you have in place to just help maybe cancel them when such situations happen?
That's a very good question, because this is something that we've discussed repeatedly, and I'm very happy that even the media owners and the media managers are beginning to realize that we need to cancel our journalists. Most of them go through a lot of trauma. I remember sometime there was this story of this journalist who covered the famine in Ethiopia, and there was this dramatic picture of a child who was waiting to die, and there was a vulture waiting to devour the child. Actually, for many years, that journalist could not live with that image. And eventually he killed himself. That's about 5 years ago. He actually killed himself because he got into a depression after that. Now, I think as media managers, we must take care of our journalists. They need counseling as much as those victims do, because they are the first ones who arrive at messy scenes. It is through their eyes that the public sees all these tragedies. And these people, Noella, are human beings, okay? But you don't know. Some of them don't sleep at night. They go through the worst nightmares. Any
advice maybe to the public out there who are always criticizing journalists and media houses?
It's easy to criticize when you're out there. When you get in, and you're sent by your editor to go and do a story, and you don't know where to begin, because you've always taken it for granted that when a politician is talking, you begin your story from the first word he said, and you add your story with the last thing he said. When you realize that you must exercise your judgment to get that nugget of that story from all that fluff that person is talking, that is when, and you are alone, by the way, and your editor expects a story. That is when you realize it is not as easy as I thought. When you're put in the studio, like Noella here, and you're told, interview this guy, interview the Minister for Finance, he's just read his budget, and you start sweating, when the glare of, the cameras come on you. That is when you realize that it is not as easy. But again, that challenge will stimulate you. It makes you a better person. It makes you realize that you become a journalist through hard work. And that person you see out there, being denigrated as, those press people, that person, when you are inside here, that is when you start respecting that person. A journalist's life is very hard, very, very hard.